Hello Canada, welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, Alias Tagay. Well, lots kind of going on in the news cycle here. It's funny how just nobody's reporting on the Calistini involvement and the divided caucus of the Liberals between what I believe is true infiltration by the Modi government, and then you have the Calistini extremist government that was involved in not just Pierre Trudeau but his son. Now, there's way too much to try to put all of the pieces together with the lack of, transparency that our government has, especially in the last 10 years. It's just, forget it. They don't want you to know anything because they're that corrupt. We're going to dabble on kind of a little bit of a... We're going to go a little bit back in time, and we're just going to kind of weave some things together here and just kind of make the obvious known, because nobody seems to really be talking about it. Now, I've been on this Calistini India interference for a long time. You'd have to scroll back a long ways, and you can see that I've actually done multiple series. I believe I have a 2-part and even a 3-part series on the Calistinis. They're a terrorist organization, people. They're a terrorist organization. And we're going to kind of break down the reality of what's going on with that, and how, now, it's just a feeling. It's not an accusation per se, but it seems as though a lot of things are pointing to the fact that Anand and a few people that have left the party and a few people that are still in the party seem to really kind of be in bed with India. And I'm wondering if this is why CSIS has came out after Carney and Anand and them said, no, there's no more foreign interference in India, and debunked that and just said, sorry, there is. Now, let's just kind of dabble. We're going to start off with our foreign affairs waste of skin, and this is her with the new Liberal Party. Yeah.
Official said, I think we could say we're confident that activity, being extortion and threats of violence, is not continuing. I know you gave numerous interviews in Canada where you talked about guardrails, you talked about other things in the transcript, but I do not understand, yes or no, do you share that position? Has the violence ended, yes or no?
We are continuing at all times to take public safety and security in Canada, including transnational repression and foreign interference, seriously. That includes a key message that I would like to deliver today, which is that no country has a pass when it comes to Canadian public safety and security. That is the reason why we've listed the Bishnoi gang as a terrorist entity. That is the reason why we ordered senior Indian diplomats and government officials to leave our country. That is the reason why we have passed or are introducing laws relating to extortion and online harm and surveillance. That is the reason why in my joint statement with my counterpart, Minister Jai Shankar, I have specifically indicated that the rule of law, the respect for the criminal code in our country, as well as an independent enforcement mechanism, will continue to occur regardless.
But is this activity ongoing, yes or no?
As I said, foreign interference, transnational repression is taken extremely seriously by our government.
Now,
and it
she
will
goes on for 6 minutes as she's being questioned about this, because the PM himself hasn't taken any questions in a week. Ever since a lot of his Brookfield ties have come out, a lot of this whole Indian kind of thing, of course the Trump battle and how he's just refusing to talk to them. And I hope that if you're new, tune into some of my earlier episodes, you'd be surprised just how corrupt this guy really is. Now, this is just Trudeau 2.0. The party's been building this way the whole time. I don't necessarily know if Trudeau was smart enough to understand what exactly he was being puppeted to do. I think he was just convinced on this climate agenda, but without really being aware of just how badly he was selling out Canada. The guy's got an IQ of like 86, so yeah, you never know what a dummy like that's doing. But when you're dealing with people like Anand, Carney, and some of the other MPs, they're a little bit smarter than that. And Carney evading questions should tell you right off the hop, should sound alarms. You are being gaslit. You're being gaslit. You're being blatantly lied to. Now, this is a little bit further in the interview. Pay attention to her voice, her demeanor, and, well, her body language.
The question. We've asked you repeatedly. We had a senior official speaking for your government speak to us and say that India is no longer interfering in our domestic electoral process, and you won't tell us whether or not that's on the record, whether or not that's happening. Has it stopped or not?
There's a question on the floor which I will answer. I want to be clear. If you read the entire transcript, you will see that senior government official gave a number of responses, which we and I specifically agree with, relating to the guardrails that we have in place. The guardrails are the key aspect of Canadian foreign policy that I am focusing on. First and foremost, enacting laws that address transnational repression and foreign interference, moving to appoint a commissioner that will be overseeing foreign interference, ensuring that the Bishnoi gang is listed as a terrorist entity, ordering senior Indian officials to leave our country, ensuring that an independent investigation and judicial process continue without any interference. Those are key pillars of our foreign policy. Those are what were mentioned by the senior government official, and that is what I am focusing on in my response to you, period.
While she's saying this, literally while she's saying this, RCMP are going to houses of Khalistini terrorists and warning them, if there is no security threat, then why is this going on? No longer a threat. How Canada U-turned on India ahead of Carney visit. Ottawa says India is no longer a security threat after allegations of transnational violence rocked bilateral ties, even as Canadian Sikh activists live under threat. Can Carney's India visit reset relations? As officials in Ottawa were preparing for the Prime Minister Mark Carney's maiden visit to India, Canadian police were knocking on Sikh activists' door in Surrey, Vancouver, on Sunday to inform him that his life was at risk. Monandir Singh, who heads the Sikh Federation of Canada, had previously already received 3 such warnings from the Vancouver police, but this time, citing a confidential informant, police told Singh that his wife and 2 children were at risk too. I urge you to go scroll way down if you're new or you haven't seen. I break down the Khalistini terrorists. I'm not saying that for sure India wasn't involved in what happened. What I am saying is there is more evidence pointing to the fact that this was done on the inside. There is a battle going on in the Khalistini movement. They're getting nowhere in India. Nobody in India talks about the Khalistini revolt, or to them it's just a stain. They're completely against it. The movement's gone. It's been gone for decades. The only place it thrives is in Australia, Canada, and the UK. Now, these 3 countries have something kind of in common. If you've watched my previous episodes, you'll kind of have a hint. And I'm going to tie this in at the end of the episode. Now, something else that I'm aware of that not a lot of people probably know, but because I've been dealing with this Palestine movement for quite some time, I've seen a lot of propaganda coming out of India. And what are they pushing? They're pushing Anita Anand. They're pushing her all the way up to the position of Prime Minister of Canada. Now, I'm not talking just 1 or 2. There are thousands people of propaganda coming out of India being fed to Canadians of that diaspora, trying to convince and sell Anita Anand as the next Prime Minister. Keep that in mind while we're dealing with all of this foreign interference. Hardeep Nijjar was de-lifed on June 18th, 2023. Then Anita Anand was removed as the Minister of National Defense and swapped over to the Treasury Board on July 26th, 2023. Then, September 18th of 2023, the turd stands up in Parliament and blames the Indian government. Now, that cabinet shuffle that he did came right out of the blue. There's always some corruption going on with them, but it was one of the ones where everybody was just kind of going, what just happened? Now, if you kind of put the pieces together and go with the dates, something fishy is going on. Also around this time is when, Chandra Arya went to India. You know, Chandra Arya, the guy that Carney booted and stole his seat. Think, people. There's no such thing as coincidence. There's just unproven realities. Now, this is Anand talking about the Nijjar case while she was in Trudeau's cabinet.
In English, please. In English.
Yesterday, it was a very difficult time to hear the Prime Minister make the remarks that he did, especially for families who come from India. I'm thinking about my parents, for example. And I will say that I think that that sentiment is shared by South Asians and families who come from India, regardless of religion. And I would just say that this is a time where we have to do two things. One, let the legal process continue as it must, and be prudent in that respect.
Why did the government...
Can I just finish? And the second thing that we have to do is that we need to be empathetic, because this is a time that families who come from India, regardless of religion, are going to find it difficult. And so I would just ask us to be empathetic and unified at the same time. And I appeal for calm.
Last year, there was a policy on...
Right. Do you notice the difference? Pretty big. Now, what a lot of people aren't aware of, and I'm just going to do kind of a short recap because obviously I've done hours and hours of research on this, and I've been following this Khalistini movement for a long time. I'm actually more than a decade. They know there's a lot of indiscrepancies that have been going on, that have been sending flags to countries around the world. Now, here's one that nobody seems to want to talk about.
Canadian Minister for Migration Mark Miller has now corrected the date for grant of citizenship to Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who was gunned down in Surrey in British Columbia in Canada on June the 18th of this year. Miller now has made clear that Nijjar was granted citizenship on May the 25th of 2007. The minister had declared only a day earlier that Nijjar was granted this citizenship on March the 13th of 2015, so quite a difference in those dates. He does not say where the discrepancy arose. He does acknowledge now that the error in dates is his responsibility to assume, suggesting perhaps that he had been given the wrong date by his own department officials. Miller had announced the earlier date, he said, to dispel baseless rumors that Niger was not a Canadian citizen. He now says that, while offering the correction without elaboration, that nothing justifies the killing of Niger. Clearly, it is nobody's case that a murder would be justified had the date of citizenship been one and not the other. But it is a rather odd error. The minister takes responsibility for it but offers no explanation for it. Presumably, almost certainly, that earlier date of March the 3rd, 2015 had also come from some form of official records. It could hardly have been a date that someone just invented, but it does point further to the fact that with Niger, all has not been as it seems, not even to the Canadian authorities. Niger did not enter Canada as Hardeep Singh Nijjar for a start. He came under another name, and according to Indian officials, that name was Ravi Sharma, and he came to Canada on a fake passport to then claim persecution and seek asylum.
That point alone should have had him deported. Why wasn't he? Especially since he was already on the terrorist list. So even after they caught him lying about who he was to get into our country illegally, they found out he was on a terror list. How deep does the rabbit hole go? And of course, Mark Miller would be involved. He's just another one of the corrupt Trudeau WEF team.
The CSIS report reads, quote, "A small group of individuals are considered Khalistani extremists because they continue to use Canada as a base for the promotion, fundraising, or planning of violence, primarily in India. In particular, real and perceived Khalistani extremism emerging from Canada continues to drive Indian foreign interference activities in Canada," unquote. For several years, India has been raising concerns about the growing presence of Khalistani separatists in Canada and their motivated anti-India narrative. However, Canada's National Intelligence Agency has only now just confirmed that India has been communicating for a long time. The constant involvement of CVKEs in violent activities inside Canada has finally raised alarm bells in Ottawa. Ties between India and Canada hit rock bottom when in September 2023, then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused Indian agents of being involved in Niger's killing. While the Indian government officially rubbished Trudeau's claims and demanded evidence, reports in India pointed at inter-gang rivalry within Canada. Canada labelled Indian High Commissioner Sanjay Verma and other diplomats as persons of interest in the investigation. Khalistanis in Canada released threatening posters and videos targeting Indian diplomats, prompting a sharp protest from New Delhi, which called this a red line in diplomatic conduct.
There has still been zero evidence, zero, zilch, nada, that India was part of this end of life. No evidence. Instead, we get talking points and gaslighting from, of course, the propaganda outlet. There's still zero proof, people. None. But we do have piles of other evidence that the media isn't talking about.
Exclusive. This is a big breaking news update, once again exposing a paper trail that leads the Khalistani extremists in Canada, in British Columbia, directly to Jagmeet Singh's NDP and also Justin Trudeau's party, Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party. So we expose all of this links today following this paper trail that we've managed to access only here on CNN News 18.
Again, I've already reported on this, and as always, I post all the links below. So if you go back, way back, and look into the Khalistani terror organization, the links to Pierre and the Turd, as well as a lot of other things that went down, especially how Pierre knew what was going on with the flight that the Air India flight that kind of went down, and how nobody was really held to justice. And there's a bunch of This is way deeper than what mainstream is letting on. And it's been part of our society for 50 years.
Veteran journalist and author Terry Milski took to social media platform Twitter to hit out at Khalistan supporters for this dangerous poster, saying, "This is extremely dangerous. Khalistanis are whipping up anger, targeting Indian diplomats they call killers of..."
Now, do you notice it's Terry Milowski at CBC? And he retired in 2016. Maybe free to finally talk?
Shaheed Hardeep Nijjar, shot in a mafia-style hit in Surrey, British Columbia on June 18. There is zero evidence of any Indian role. It's grossly irresponsible. Milski is the author of Blood for Blood, 50 years of the Global Khalistan Project, and has repeatedly hit out at Khalistani supporters in Canada. Nijjar, of course, is not the first Khalistani supporter to be killed under suspicious circumstances in the recent past. Avtar Singh Khanda of the Khalistan Liberation Force died in a hospital in Birmingham on the 15th of June 2023. Paramjit Singh Panjwar of the Khalistan Commando Force was shot dead in Lahore on the 6th of May 2023. Before that, Ripundam Singh Malik, accused in the Air India 1985 bombing, was shot dead in Surrey, Canada on the 15th of July 2022. Harmeet Singh alias Happy PhD, a narco-terror accused, was shot dead at a Gurdwara in Lahore, Pakistan on the 27th of January 2020.
This is inside gang warfare. These are all terror lords people. And with what they deal with, there were lots of them that had kind of become outcasts because of the internal struggle and had joined up with none other than the Bishnoi gang. They all deal in narco terrorism in order to raise money to, well, do acts of violence in India and other places around the world. This shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but it more than likely will be because mainstream will never tell you this. I love this quote. And of course, leave it to the one, the only, Sam Cooper. Seems like there is enough NSICOP to do another review about why senior officials from Global Affairs like a David Morrison type continue to promote the Liberal Party trade interests over security, especially with PRC and India. India is still one of the main perpetrators of foreign interference and espionage in Canada, says CSIS. And I will link this so that you can read it over. This is actually from January 15th, 2023, and it is Sam Cooper's The Bureau. Trudeau government repeatedly warned on interference from Chinese and Indian diplomats in a June 2019 report. And of course, by reading this over, it'll help you kind of understand a lot of what I'm trying to explain today. Now let's slowly kind of move along to where we are geopolitically and what's going on. If you've watched my previous episodes, you'll understand that Trump is going against the world order. And in order to do so, he's ending all of the tyrannical governments who are funded by backdoor corporations, as well as illegal funding that's gathered from drugs and other type of illicit affairs that happen around the world, laundered through mostly Canadian banks, a few in Europe as well. And their ties to these huge companies like Brookfield and the like. Trump wants to put an end to it. Thus the whole green scam, which really, people, carbon? Come on. Now, why do you think Trump is ignoring Canada?
I was not provided with any indication that this particular operation would be taking place. And on my understanding, I believe that the government of Canada was not provided with indication that it was going to occur.
So not informed about what was going on in Mexico. Not by Mexico, even though there is a huge amount of tourists that go down there from Canada. They were also not informed by the United States. Think carefully, and again I urge you to watch the previous few episodes that I've done exposing what's really going on geopolitically.
First and foremost, Canada wasn't involved, we weren't notified, and we do not have an intention to be involved in any military strikes or operation.
Was not informed. Was not asked. Nothing. Zero zilch. Nada.
We share the concern of the United States and many other countries relating to Iranian nuclear proliferation. And in fact, we've called on Iran for a number of years to cease proliferating in terms of its nuclear capacity. That's why we have not had diplomatic relations with Iran for 15 years.
It wasn't them that did it, it was the Conservatives. And even though the Conservatives were the ones that started this fundamental breakup with this horrible, absolutely horrible regime, Conservatives were trying to work around getting them booted out of the UN. That all came to a screaming halt in 2015 when the global order, the Liberals, a lot of the people from the EU, realized this went against what they needed and wanted in order to fulfill the New World Order. This spiderweb entangles a whole lot of countries, parties, members, people. It's out of control. Trump knows this. And now here's Carney lying straight out of his face, which is totally normal. This is what he does.
But certainly we have both the Minister of Finance, myself with the President, the Minister of Finance with their counterpart, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I should say, and myself with the President. We have had a series of discussions over recent weeks about the possibility of this happening if the diplomatic efforts were not successful. It's been very clear the threat of what has now been realized in terms of military action.
Yeah, okay, blah, 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 blah. Now, if he really knew that, if he really knew, do you think he would have flown his plane right on the edge of Iran? Yes, he was on the Turkmenistan side on his way to India, but he literally flew right beside what is a huge war zone that happened the AM of his first day there. So he flew out the afternoon of the day before, landed in the morning, all hell was breaking loose. Trump don't give a crap because Canada is a socialist, corrupt nation. And most Canadians are starting to really figure this out. There's a lot of us that have been on this for a long time, but this is why you need to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can wake up and actually see what Canada has become.
Just wanting to get your thoughts on Mark Carney and your relationship with him while you were Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and any advice you have to Canadians who think he might make a good Prime Minister.
Well, Mark Carney was Governor of the Bank of England, and under his tenure, too much money was printed, which did damage to the British economy and put our economy off track. He, at the last election, endorsed Rachel Reeves'
Keep that name at the top of your head. Rachel Reeves.
Economic policy. She's now become Chancellor. It's been a disaster for Britain. The country is heading for bankruptcy. So I would strongly recommend not backing Mark Carney or his policies on net zero, which have been disastrous for Britain and would be disastrous for Canada.
Now, the other thing that was going on is that they introduced mass immigration. They were doing the same thing that Canada is doing today. And by the way, there is a clip, I don't have time to show it today, of the new ambassador talking to, I believe it's CBC, about how Canada needs 100 million people, not 40 million, from India. They need another 60 million people from India. Are you putting these pieces together? Is it starting to make sense? Now the media is out trying to spin, because Carney has finally come out and he's like, oh no, go Trump. Yeah, I'm all for this. You're a great president. Yeah, go get Iran. Enough of this terror. And they're saying how he's been against it the whole time. I could not find a single clip. Not one. Zilch, nada. I spent hours upon hours. I couldn't find one. Not once has he ever came out until he became prime minister and actually had to try and be political that he's against the Iranian regime. Why was he not trying to boot them off the UN if he was so serious about terrorism? This is amazing breaking from Robert Jenrick.
Here in Leeds, where Rachel Reeves is the MP, 1 in 4 aren't working. Now, you'd think the person in charge of the economy would be focused on fixing that. Instead, she's been hanging out with the man she describes as her friend, Arshad Khatana.
Pleasure to be here with you this evening.
A man who shared a military video, which also glorified terrorists from 2 terror groups, who said that those who speak against Islam are an evil gang who he will help to destroy, who's hosted preachers at his Leeds mosque with vile views. One said we shouldn't use Google because it's run by the Jews. Another is infamous for supporting a despicable Islamist murderer. Arshad has shared conspiracy theories about 9/11 and an international lending mafia backed by Zionist Rothschild criminals. He's called for revenge against India and for everyone to get together and finish these evils on earth. And he said he would only support Reeves and Labour if they do what I demand. Why is Reeves friends with this man? Why is she hanging out with him time and again since 2010? Why is she asking his views on foreign policy? And why is she going around to Arshad's house as Chancellor for lunch? Shouldn't she be focused on getting your bills down and bringing back good jobs?
Now, Scott Rickard posted this, and I ran it through my AI as well. And I was having problems with this when I was doing the live footage of when Trump actually attacked Iran. And everything was coming through. It was all cut, edited, AI'd, misinformation, twisted information. And of course, like a lot of it, you can't necessarily call it real when you're running through AI because AI hasn't had time to confirm anything. So I give it that little bit of error. But when you get CBC putting out stuff like this, where some people are mourning the death of Khamenei, and you find out that yes, Scott, you are Sean, you are absolutely correct. This photo is generated by AI, but CBC, no problem. They will put this crap out. And then you get the sympathizer news. Now, just like you had Hitler sympathizers, you have, well, jihad sympathizers. And yes, mainstream media has been pushing this Palestine crap lies. Hezbollah, Hamas, all of them, the Muslim Brotherhood, are all funded and pushed to do nasty things and try to spread terror around the world from Iranian oil. It's where their money comes from. Cut the head off the snake and it'll all wither away. This is what Trump is doing. While all of these other countries in Canada, we should be embarrassed at ourselves. There's a lot of us that were putting the information out. We've been funding Hamas and Hezbollah through all these different types of NGO agencies, donating to whatever you want to call it now, some DEI, ESG bullcrap that you can't trace the money. The money ends up in their hands. So they can throw gays and lesbians off rooftops, stone women, force them to cover themselves, banish them, burn them, scold them, not allow them to go out without permission. And there's people in Canada who are actually cheering for this, especially a lot in the LGBTQ RSTUZ2 takeover. They become extremists. It's in our schools. There are teachers out there that believe this stuff. They should all be fired immediately. And our media, well, like I said, they are sympathizers. And this is what the consistency of propaganda does in order to keep their narrative afloat and push propaganda.
Iran is responding with force today to U.S. and Israeli airstrikes that have killed its supreme leader. At least 9 people are dead after a missile strike on a city in central Israel. Iran has also fired missiles and drones into neighboring Gulf states, killing at least 4 people and damaging a port, various hotels, and airports right across the region. Confirmation of the Ayatollah's death by Iranian state media brought tens of thousands of people out on the streets in protest. 40 days of mourning have now been declared across Iran, and an interim leadership council has been put in place.
And of course, the way that they kind of push that is though, well, they're in mourning, so we should just stop. They don't necessarily say it, but they throw this subtle hint on how now, well, because of these deaths, they're in 40 days of mourning. Just like a lot of these weirdos are coming out and saying, oh, they're doing it during Ramadan. They like attacking us at Christmas. Hello? In the meantime, reality check. Toronto. USA. This is going on all around the world. But what about right in Tehran and Iran? And there is piles of this footage, people, and I verified all of it. Can you hear them? It's echoing through the streets, people. A thunderous applaud and cheers. The D word to Khomeini. The end of the IRGC. The end of tyranny. They're cheering USA, Donald Trump. They're cheering Israel. Bibi. Why isn't your media showing you this? Because it goes against the narrative. They've been brainwashing Canadians and other countries around the world, and people are starting to finally realize what's going on. This is why they are putting huge bans and they are censoring all of these different types of social media platforms, because they don't want you to know the truth. Because if we really knew the truth, we would band together, hold hands, and punt this liberal disaster party and try to make true change and hold governments to account. It won't happen with propaganda, because these people are just full of themselves. Now, this is a guy who they've been cheering for because they're hoping that because of his position being the Shah, now he's been booted out for 47 years, but they want him back. The vast majority of them want him back because they understand that if they don't get at least some decency of a leader who wants to give democracy, there is a high likelihood that they are going to end up under the same regime or even worse. Again, mainstream not telling you this. They're trying to make it seem as though he's a nobody. There's not that many people that want him. Right? This is the reality.
What is your message to President Trump?
My message to President Trump is that I'm here to echo and join millions of my compatriots inside and outside of Iran to thank him for having done and having the courage to do what is not easy, but intervene. And he will go down in the annals of Iranian history as the most celebrated foreign leader that changed the ball game and changed the world as a result.
So from death to Israel, death to America, to we love America, we love Israel. This goes against everything the global cabal has been trying to push in order to create fear, hate, and division, and with it, chaos.
In January, President Trump said this about you, quote, "He seems very nice, but I don't know how he'd play within his own country. I don't know whether or not his country would accept his leadership, and certainly if they would, that would be fine with me." You don't seem to have President Trump's wholehearted support.
Well, first of all, I don't think that somebody in my position will ever expect to have an official endorsement of a foreign government or a foreign leader. What I do know now is that millions of Iranians inside Iran and outside of Iran are calling my name. They recognize in me the person uniquely placed to play a role of transitional leadership. Not running for office, because that's not what I'm doing, but to be a bridge to that destiny.
Do you hear that? He doesn't want to go in there to be the ruler. He understands the geopolitical heartache that he's encountering and that his people are going through. He's not asking to be given Iran as his land. He understands that the reason the people are chanting him isn't to give him extreme power, ultimate power. It's for him to come in and help them transition to a diplomatic country and to rid the hate, the extreme Islamists. And he's been talking this way for years. He's not asking for supreme power. He just understands that something needs to be done to help the people. That's his country. We're going to get into a little bit of a story about what happened with him nearing the end of the show.
Now let's talk about what the Iran strike did to the so-called special relationship. Because this is where over 100 years of British manipulation of American policy is shattering right out in the open. When the strikes began on Saturday, Britain's position was extraordinary. The UK was informed Friday afternoon, not included. Starmer refused to let the U.S. use the British bases in Diego Garcia or in Britain itself. Britain refused not because it developed a conscience about international law. It refused because it's no longer running the table. And the British press admitted that it is the end of the game for the special relationship, with a headline that read, "Starmer faces greater quandary over special relationship after Iran attack." And that article pointed out that Starmer appears to have had little influence on Trump, who went ahead regardless. Now, a conservative British channel put it even more bluntly in terms of the damage that's been done to the special relationship.
What are the implications, Piers Pottinger, for the special relationship in the context of Starmer's refusal to help?
I don't know, but if I was...
I don't think the Americans will forget.
No, I don't think so, and I think Trump will be... if indeed it's true that he wanted to use our bases and we didn't allow him, I think he will not forget that or forgive it.
But it wasn't just Britain. France, Germany, and the UK issued a joint statement clarifying first and foremost they did not participate in the strikes. Not a statement of strategy, a statement of absence. And the best the European Union could manage was Ursula von der Leyen sending a message to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And here's what she said.
As our strategic partner, we will work closely with you to de-escalate and safeguard regional stability. You can count on our full support in these turbulent times. The European Union Gulf Cooperation Council partnership will only get stronger in the period ahead. Now, the responses to this on X were brutal. One commentator appropriately rephrased it, quote, "In other words, Trump won't take my call, and we have no clue what's going on." That's exactly right. And the statesman drilled down on the same point. The Iran war makes it official. America is breaking with Europe. So the special relationship is cracking in public. When Tehran calls, it calls Washington, not London. And the question worth asking is, how did that special relationship actually work? Not the photo ops and the state visits. What was the real mechanism? Part of the answer is former Prince Andrew. Let's go back to 2008, when the British were still happily directing American foreign policy. Andrew, then Britain's special representative for international trade, sat down in Kyrgyzstan with a room that included businessmen, government officials, and the American ambassador. The American ambassador wrote it all down in a cable, later published by WikiLeaks. And she told people that what Andrew told the room with astonishing frankness was the following: the United Kingdom, Western Europe, and by extension, you Americans too are now back in the thick of playing the great game. And this time we aim to win. He wasn't being metaphorical. He was describing it to an American diplomat on the record, the actual operating framework of British foreign policy. Not the public version dressed up in democracy and human rights, but the real version, in his official capacity as Britain's trade representative. Now Andrew's been arrested, the first royal arrest in centuries, on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The Epstein files contain evidence he was passing confidential trade reports into Epstein's networks. So the man who bragged about winning the great game was running British strategic intelligence through Jeffrey Epstein. That is not a personal scandal. That is the operating method of the imperial apparatus, now on public record. And shortly after Andrew's arrest came the arrest of Lord Peter Mandelson, who had been appointed by Starmer as Britain's ambassador to Washington, sent to manage the special relationship at the very moment Trump came in for his second term.
So you can see how deep this goes. And all of these people are linked to corporations. All of them are linked to the WEF. They are linked to Davos.
But there's a reason. There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back, so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later, because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. And by the way, it's the same big club they use to beat you over the head with all day long when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. Good, honest, hard-working people, white collar, blue collar, doesn't matter what color shirt you have on. Good, honest, hard-working people continue. These are people of modest means. Continue to elect these rich cocksuckers who don't give a fuck about them. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't care about you at all. At all. At all. Man, you know?
They don't care. They don't care. They don't care about you. And they are coming for your pensions. You want to bet? February 27th, 2026. TransAlta signs Alberta data center deal with CPP Investments Brookfield. Now, I've been reporting on this for the longest time. That is just the newest one. Even the Quebec pensions are invested through Brookfield. And the people who work for them are in Parliament, or being appointed to the Privy Council, or ambassadors. We have been completely corrupted. Joint infrastructure projects. Proposed large-scale funds aim at pooling billions for domestic investment, further integrating pension funds with Brookfield's investments. These actions indicate that the Canadian Pensions Fund through Brookfield as a key partner in accessing diversified, stable, and long-term investments across energy, infrastructure, and strategic domestic sectors. They are invested in pipelines in Saudi Arabia. They are invested in pipelines in the United States. This is what de-risking did. The government de-risked green corporations that are high risk in order for them to get the loans they need. And then once they're de-risked and they're now able to get the loans, the government is also saying, well, since they're de-risked, they're low risk now, we can supplement them with tax dollars. Welcome to Canada, or should I say Brookfield. Now listen very carefully to what Hegseth said today.
To the media outlets and political left screaming endless wars, stop. This is not Iraq. This is not endless. I was there for both. Our generation knows better, and so does this president. He called the last 20 years of nation-building wars dumb, and he's right. This is the opposite. This operation is a clear, devastating, decisive mission. Destroy the missile threat, destroy the Navy, no nukes. Israel has clear missions as well, for which we are grateful. Capable partners, as we've said since the beginning, capable partners are good partners. Unlike so many of our traditional allies who wring their hands and clutch their pearls, hemming and hawing about the use of force. America, regardless of what so-called international institutions say, is unleashing the most lethal and precise air power campaign in history.
Now, the partners bit is exactly what, well, I've been trying to expose on the last 3 or 4 episodes. They're after the global world order. They're trying to shut this down. This isn't just governments. This is bankers and these huge corporations that have been sucking the lives and incomes out of countries, not just Canada, around the world. They've been pitting third world countries against each other. China does the same thing. They go in through back doors and get loans. They pay off politicians. Trump's trying to end it. That's why he's cutting off China. There's the strategic moves that Trump has made in the last 2 months is mind-boggling. If you understand the depths, the deepest, darkest recesses of where the evils really lie. And that's Carney and Brookfield, BlackRock. That's the WEF. That's the UN. Why the UN? Well, why is Iran allowed to be part of the United Nations when you have all these countries that have listed them as a terrorist organization? United States, Canada, Australia, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Paraguay, Ecuador, all 27 member states of the European Union. And again, this is something I've been talking about for a long time. They were actually appointed and sat as chair for like a year on the Women's Rights Organization. All while these countries knew they were a terrorist organization and knew what they were doing to women. Think, people. Trump is doing what our government should have done 30, 40 years ago. In fact, we should never have seen Iran fall.
To understand what Trump just struck, you need to understand what Iran actually is in the global power structure. And that story begins in 1908. In that year, a British speculator named William Knox D'Arcy struck oil in southwest Persia. He had purchased exclusive extraction rights from the Persian Shah for a pittance, just 16% of profits, and with no Iranian allowed to audit the books. From that single concession, the Anglo-Persian Oil Company was born. It later became the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Today, you know it as British Petroleum, BP. Winston Churchill, as First Lord of the Admiralty, called it, quote, a prize from fairyland beyond our wildest dreams. And he meant it. The British government bought a 51% controlling stake in 1914. The Royal Navy ran on Iranian oil. Britain's entire standard of living in the first half of the 20th century was subsidized by wealth extracted from Iran. In 1950, Abadan had become the world's largest refinery. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company controlled all oil in Iran, while Iranian workers lived in shanty towns without running water. Think about that. The same empire that people think of as a quaint historical artifact was literally powered by Iranian oil, and the Iranians got almost nothing. So when Iranian nationalists finally rose up and elected Mohammad Mossadegh as prime minister in 1951, a man who nationalized the oil company for his own people, what happened? The British and the CIA overthrew him in 1953. Operation Ajax, they called it. They installed the Shah as their puppet. And who did they use on the ground to create the chaos for the coup? The Muslim Brotherhood, the same organization Trump designated as terrorists just weeks ago. Mark Curtis documents how the British and the CIA paid the Ayatollah Khamenei, who was Khomeini's own mentor, for street violence during the uprising. Now here's where it gets really interesting. When the Shah outlived his usefulness, what happened? The British and Americans acquiesced to Khomeini's revolution in 1979. One puppet replaced another. The Muslim Brotherhood's ideology became the scaffold for Khomeini's theocratic state, its belief system. And the backward system of constant war between Israel, the Arab states, and Iran has been profitable for the City of London each time it has happened. The City of London sets global oil prices. It insures virtually all oil shipments. It banks the sovereign wealth of its former Middle East colonies. And as we've documented extensively, it functions as the premier money laundromat for the drug, weapons, and trafficking mafias that thrive on regional chaos. That is the system. The mullahs are not an independent power. They are the current franchise holders of a British financial operation that has controlled Iran for 118 years. And the wars between Israel and the Arab states, between Sunni and Shia, between all the parties in the Middle East, these are managed conflicts designed to keep the region unstable so the financial architecture stays in place. So here's the question no one in the media is asking. Why now? Not just because of the nuclear program, not just because of the missiles. The real answer is that Donald Trump has spent the last year systematically dismantling the British financial architecture in the Middle East, and the mullahs were the last obstacle. Look at what he's already done. Since Trump assumed office the second time, he secured over $2 trillion in Gulf sovereign wealth fund investments, money that used to sit in City of London banks. It's now committed to American manufacturing, energy, and AI infrastructure. He organized the Arab world and Israel into his board of peace. ending the carnage in Gaza and beginning to rebuild it.
They have been using countries against countries, religions against religions, and going for the most evil possible in order to inflict the most damage and carnage. They don't care about you. They don't care. This is the reality of where we are today. I was working on another episode, and again, Buddy sent me a link. I'm starting to become a fan of Moose on the Loose. Watch this morning's episode and the ties to Brookfield and how Carney is openly breaking the law. Openly breaking the law. Now, I kind of had an episode going on that, but I was like, awesome, I can kind of get focused on this. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope I enlightened you. There is so much going on, and it's hard. I do lots of research, and there's still stuff I'm finding out daily. I don't think a person can ever say they know everything that's going on. I make lots of assumptions. I build graphs. I trace out the obvious. I've studied propaganda for decades, and I also know tyranny. And when you link both of them together, it's hard not to see the webs on how all of these corporations are joined, especially to the banking system, the WEF, and, well, Brookfield and Davos. They don't care about you people. They don't care. Anyways, I'm going to call that an episode. I'm Alias Tagay. You've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal. Stay informed.